I'm going to call this council meeting of June 24th to order. We respect and recognize the First Nations within whose unceded lands the village of Kaslo is situated, including the Tanaha, the Snipes, and the Silks people, and the Indigenous and Métis residents of our community. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda with a couple of late agenda items, and that is Kaslo or the council procedures bylaw review, RV park proposal process, which, yeah. So, move the late items, Councillor Brown. Okay, and seconded by Councillor Leaflet. Any discussion? All those in favor? And adoption of the minutes of the June 10th council meeting, if there are no errors or omissions. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Leafwood. All those in favor? It's carried. And we have a delegation this evening from Anne-Marie Nicole. Welcome, Anne-Marie. And thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. So do you want to share your screen or do you want me to call up your presentation?
No, I'd prefer to share my screen if that's okay. It's less work for you.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I promise not to take too much time. Would you like me to begin now or wait?
No, you're up.
Okay. So my name is Anne-Marie. I'm a professor at Simon Fraser University. I'm trained as an epidemiologist, and my area of research is lung cancer and how we can prevent lung cancer, which is why I'm very interested in radon gas, because it is actually the second leading cause of lung cancer. If people don't smoke, it's actually the leading cause of cancer. So I'm part of a national program. I represent people in BC, and I help provide people with 100 free radon test kits, which is a program that we started with federal funding to encourage people to learn a bit more about radon in their home and to increase awareness, because less than 50% of Canadians still understand that radon is a serious exposure. In British Columbia, we have regions that are quite high. Over time, more people are learning, but only 15% of people maybe have tested their homes. And the only way that you're going to know if it's in your home is if you actually test. So we provided 100 test kits to Kaslo as a way of getting things going, and I'll be presenting the results of our work. So just to say, the program tests all across Canada. So again, I'm the BC person, but I also work at the BC Centre for Disease Control. But people have tested all across the country. And about now, we've given out about 20,000 detectors, and about 30% of people across Canada have tested above the guideline. We are a uranium-rich country. A lot of uranium mines still do operate predominantly in Saskatchewan, but in BC, because we've had a moratorium since 1986, many of the known deposits which exist in the interior have not been mined. So amongst the communities testing this year, Rock Creek, Fraser Valley, Kaslo, Nakusp. So some of these might be your neighbors, along with the Vancouver Island region, Oliver, all the way up to Atlin, to the far top northwest of the province. And then you can see we've tested communities far across the country as well. So as I mentioned, radon is the leading cause of lung cancer if you don't smoke. If you smoke and are exposed to radon, those two exposures together greatly increase your risk to about 1 in 3. It's estimated that 3,000 Canadians die every year from this. And what is really important to know about lung cancer is, as people are not smoking anymore, lung cancer rates are not coming down. And there's possibly many reasons for that, including increased risk of exposure to fire smoke, and other carcinogens like arsenic in drinking water. But radon stands out as one of the clearest known established human carcinogens that lead to lung cancer. So where does it come from? Again, as I noted, Canada is a uranium-rich country, and uranium exists in the ground all across Canada, but there's places where pockets are higher. So to the east of Kelowna and south has been well known for a long time that there is a significant amount of uranium in the ground, and that area goes from sort of Kelowna all the way to almost the Alberta border. The uranium in the ground breaks down over time and it gives off a gas. And in fact, this gas was first discovered in Canada, which was really interesting by Ernest Rutherford's team. That gas doesn't live very long. It lives for about 4 days, but it's long enough for it to migrate from the soil into spaces above. All buildings can have radon. If it's a barn, a workplace, a mobile home with a skirt around it, a log cabin, doesn't matter what kind of a house you have. The levels tend to be higher on the ground floor or in a basement. And the federal government recommends that all buildings be tested using a 3-month test kit, which is what we provided for free to folks in your community. If the levels are above 200 becquerels per meters cubed, and that's the unit that we use to measure the radiation, it's called alpha particle radiation that's given off from radon gas, then it is recommended that you reduce. Now, 200 is not, that's not actually a safe level. It's just a level at which the relative risk is double. So results of 199 or 190 are still meaning that you have an elevated risk of developing cancer. In Europe, the level is 100. And in the US, it's about 150. By now, everybody that took part in the challenge should have received this result piece of paper, either by email or some people may have requested it by mail. We had 67%, we gave out 100 test kits, 67 people started them. One person it's still outstanding, so that's okay if it's somebody that still has it. They're good for up to a year. It just means that they've missed the free give back into the box. We have so far sent out 60 reports. We're still waiting for 6 of them to come back from the lab. So the devices are sent back to a lab and they're read to see how much radiation has accumulated in the puck over time. These are the results for your community. This information is an aggregate result, so there's no way of identifying anybody's home. And what we see here is the green is below 100. The yellow is the area between 100 and 200, so between what European governments suggest is okay and what the Canadian government suggests is okay. And the discrepancy for that is in part because Canada is a uranium-rich country and they recognize that uranium is present throughout, so it can be harder to get us all down to 100. But we did see a considerable proportion of homes, and this is why I'm here, between 2 and 600. 600 to 1,000. And then again, we saw a few homes for over 1,000. It doesn't, radon doesn't differentiate between the kind of home that you live in. What we did, mostly you did have single detached homes that were tested, but you can see more of them were above 200 than less. Duplexes also as well. And then interestingly, you had other kinds of building types, so that include cottages, mobile homes with loose or tight skirting. We did see one above. And then, this is not atypical. We usually find that most people that test their homes are people who own their own homes. And sometimes people just don't provide us with that information. I think for me, what was interesting about the results here in Kaslo is that some people had tested before. And it's possible that these folks that had tested before and their homes were still above 200 may have used a different kind of test kit. The test kits that we provided are the most accurate on the market. You can get digital detectors. However, there are some issues with them, and the government has had to recall some of those devices. Perhaps people were doing a check and make sure. But just to say that there were people already in your community who may have been aware that their homes were elevated. And then this down here, I don't know if the building official is here as well this evening, but there were four people whose homes were above 200 who indicated that they had a radon rough-in system already built into their home. Now, we had only 18 people answer this question because it's often a question that people really don't know about. A radon rough-in system up until recently was just a pipe that went from under the house into the basement of the house, hopefully with a cap on it. And that was to make it easier to put a system in. Over the last few years, that has changed in BC, and a passive stack is a pipe that's had to be built all the way up and out of the house. And then the new building code requires that all homes in BC have that passive stack. But in and of itself, it is not an active radon system. People still have to go and get a fan, which is not particularly expensive, but they have to have the fan put in and turned on for the systems to actually be active. So yeah, these folks are probably ready to go. Like the ones with the passive stack probably just need to put their fan on and why we're building new houses this way is that this makes this turning on the radon system a relatively inexpensive fix. If people have to start from scratch, it can be up to $3,000. So making sure that all our new homes actually have these systems built into them is a really important way that we're going to continue to try and reduce lung cancer going forward. But again, this only 18 people. I kind of play a game where I ask people about their radon system in their homes, and people usually think I mean radar or an alarm system. So it's
Oh,
still not a well-known thing that people have. This is a community report. So when we're done, we will distribute this. Every community that's part of the test kit challenge will get a copy of this. And it just shows the proportion of homes that were above 200. And you can see here for Kaslo, that was 60%. But again, we don't differentiate between the where of the community where those houses are. And people's data is considered private and anonymous for us. People often ask us if the year of build is important with this idea that, older houses are worse, but that's not necessarily the case. In fact, one of my research portfolios is energy efficiency. And what we can see over time is as we're tightening up our homes to address new energy step codes, what we're actually doing is sealing the radon gas in. Homes need to be very carefully balanced to make sure that the radon actually doesn't remain in the home. And that doesn't always happen. So you can see the red is the higher levels and they are fairly equally distributed. Although if you have an old leaky house, often you don't really have much of a radon problem. So you might be asking me, well, how does my community compare to others in British Columbia? And again, part of the reason I'm here is that like Kimberley and some other places where we've tested, because Kimberly's tested a few times, we are seeing, nearing 50–60% of the homes that tested were above the recommended guideline. So what do people do and how can we help people remediate this problem? In Canada, because radon is a colorless, odorless, radioactive gas, people can't tell if someone's fixing it properly. So we really recommend that people get a certified professional. The federal government has a rigorous certification program. People can both measure and remediate, or what's called radon mitigation. There is a website. This is the agency that provides the certification. You can type in your postal code and it will tell you who does remediations in your area. And luckily, thanks to people like Dana Schmidt from Kaslo, there are people who are trained who can come and help people fix their homes. But the CNRPP people are required to have insurance, which is another important factor. So we really do encourage people to consider a professional. You can do it yourself, but for good reason, hiring someone to fix your home is a good step. In other provinces, there are programs to help people offset the costs. In BC, we don't have one yet. I'm working with the BC Lung Foundation to try and set up a program where we can help subsidize. But the National Canadian Lung Association does have mitigation grants that people can apply for. They are income-based. But if you know of people who have tested high and they would like to know a bit more about, whether or not they qualify, for funds to cover. And again, it's about $3,000 to fix a home, and you can apply for quite a bit under this program. So we really encourage people, seniors or low-income families, this program is a useful one. If you work from home and you want to have a radon test kit in your home or a digital monitor, you can actually apply for a tax credit for that. Unfortunately, we haven't got mitigation covered in the tax credit yet, but this is part of our national advocacy. But you could buy a digital detector or one of the ones that we gave out for free, which is only about $60, and then you can write that off in your medical expenses at the end of the year. I think actually before we move into that, I also would like to just point out that this year, so I work also at BC Cancer, and we have started a pilot program. And if you have a test result above 800, or you know of someone that does, you may be eligible to have a free low dose CT screen. It's a very little amount of radiation. I managed to get the site in Kelowna to agree to onboard people. Over time, we've realized that early detection for lung cancer is really the best way to keep people alive after 5 years. The survival rate for lung cancer is about 15% after 5 years. Like pancreatic cancer, it really is a killer. So if people have elevated levels, or they're concerned, or they found elevated levels in other ways, not just this program, the BC Cancer has a lung health check study, and people can enroll in that. I'm happy to provide information afterwards. It's sort of my other job, so I don't put it in this presentation. But for this year, we have the opportunity to give people some reassurance, hopefully, that their lungs are still okay, or early detection if cancer is going to be a problem. Other organizations across Canada have done things after this program to, sort of acknowledge radon in the community, including making sure that radon requirements are clear in building codes and promoting awareness, including radon in real estate property disclosure. In British Columbia, if you do sell a home, you are required to discuss the radon levels in your property disclosure. That's very common in Kelowna. But Kelowna, the levels are so high there that people know to ask. Because yeah, we're seeing homes in 2,000-3,000 in the Lake Country region. So it can be expensive to fix if you have a brand new fancy home as well. So people know in BC that this is an issue. We are also advocating for coverage in new home warranties. In Ontario, if you buy a new home and it has a radon problem, it's automatically fixed. We don't have that here in BC yet. The federal government has lots of resources. If people are concerned about accurate information, there's lots of action guides and pamphlets for people to access. And then there's checklists if people want to take things on. And I have lots of information I can provide to people. And I think that's the end of it. So I thank you very much for participating in this program, and for all the people at the Municipal Hall who took part and made sure that this happened. I'm happy to answer any questions if I have time at this point in time.
Yeah, I think we'll allow you some time because it's an important topic. And thank you very much, Anne Marie, for your presentation. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Leathwood.
Through the chair, can you test the ground before you build a house? Or you just automatically put the test kit or the pipe in?
Yes, you can do a soils test for radon. However, how a home is built actually really does influence what the radon levels are inside. Things like meteorologic conditions actually influence radon levels. When there's a low pressure ridge, the gases in the soil are pushed down. And then when there's a high pressure ridge, it draws them up. So until you actually have so you can test, but it doesn't necessarily indicate whether or not it's going to be in your home. The good news, though, is that if you test and then you build a house according to the new guidelines, which includes like a sealed membrane, the new building code includes a gravel, a sealed membrane, and then this pipe. Most of the time, that actually is sufficient to keep levels quite low. So our building codes and our new builds kind of are our biggest asset towards reducing this problem, if they're built properly. The problem being that, new homes are expensive, and often people who live in less new homes or heavily renovated homes might be more at risk, or people who live in basements or have home offices in basements. That's another place we know people spend lots of time in refurbished, renovated basements, and those can be quite high.
Thank you.
It's a
Any
good
questions?
question.
Counselor Bird?
Yes, through the chair. It went by a little fast, but I noticed one of the ways that the Take Action on Radon is trying to address this problem is, I was learning about public buildings and the requirements of municipalities, like specifically municipalities, to mitigate buildings that they actually own.
Yes, the radon in the building, in occupational health and safety regulations, radon levels in public spaces are required to be 200 becquerels per meters cubed as well. The only place that this really differs is if people are in mines and other places. So for workplace health and safety, especially in schools, or other municipal buildings, yes, there is a requirement, and employees can ask the employer to test a building. The good news is buildings are usually easier to fix, sorry, because they have central HVAC, and sometimes the HVAC can be titrated quite easily so that the radon levels are lower.
You mentioned health and safety regulations for this. We were talking about municipal buildings, but what about private business?
Well, that would be again the employer-employee relationship. So employers can ask if there's a joint health and safety committee. Employers can ask to ensure that their workplace is safe, and that could include a radon test as well. Interestingly, banks have all been tested. There's a number of federally regulated buildings that have already been required to be tested federally. So, and provincially, most of the buildings that the province is responsible for, including all BC housing buildings, now have been tested too. But they're just not very open about that. I'd like to see the results of the testing. They did them in Interior and Northern Health. We just learned about that this year. So we in BC, we have the BC Radon Data Repository, the BC CDC. Again, this is a different hat of mine. But if you want to go online, you can actually see by municipality and health region what the average radon levels are, drawing from tests that have been done historically and then held at the BC CDC. So we're the only province that has a radon map like that. Nova Scotia has something similar, and so does the Yukon, but ours is the most robust. And so it's publicly available. So if you do radon map BC CDC on any device, now we've made it useful for phones. You can see by municipality as well what the radon levels are.
Any other questions? I actually have a couple. On the test kits, when we were setting them up, it indicated to put them on the floor that was most often occupied. So a lot of homes are split level and they have or have two floors, and their living area where they, living, dining, that kind of stuff is on the top floor. And then your sleeping quarters and home office. I'm talking about my home, just so you know. And it's on the lower level. So I set ours up on the main level because that's where, we are most of the day. So my reading is for that space. Is there a general rule about how much higher it could be on the floor that you did not test? Because that would be, you're having guests in your home and some of them stay for a length of time.
It can be 20% higher in the basement. It depends though if you have a heat pump or how your house is, if you have forced air heating. Forced air heating draws air from it's in the basement and then blows it all around. So it can change. A heat pump tends to keep the radon levels similar in all the levels of the home. So most of that research has been done in the UK, but forced air heating provides a different home distribution. And then if you have a wood stove or you heat your home in a different way, that can also influence it too. But generally, the radon levels in the basement can be about 20% higher than they are on the main floor. But there are a lot of, that's a real ballpark because maybe you have windows in the basement, maybe you have a different kind of furnace. So all those things will the radon levels, like I have one in my house here in Vancouver, and it sort of oscillates around 40, but it can go up to 60 and then drop to 15. Just really the levels change all the time. So that's why we test for 3 months, is that we want to get an average. We don't want to see the worst or the best. We want to kind of get a general sense of what it is in people's homes. But yeah, you could probably expect that what's in your basement is a bit higher than what was on your living space area. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And my last one is, if we're going to share this with members of the public, is there contact information that we could provide? So, because there are members of the public who do watch our meetings. There's some in the room right now, and there will be people online who might be interested in getting further information, especially if they haven't had a test yet, and they might be concerned and want to follow up.
Yes, here's my email at the end here. So oh, can you see me still? Did I lose you?
Well, we can see you, but your presentation is gone.
How's that now? It says continue to share. Can you see that? So this is my personal email, especially if you're older than 45 for a woman or 55 for a man, and you have had high levels from your home, 800 or above, please email me because I can help connect you with the researchers around the pilot. I went and got a low dose CT screen myself. My parents had a place in Sycamoose, and there's high levels there too. So I went and had a screen. It took really all of 5 minutes. This is also the website for Take Action, but people, please feel free. I am our BC person. So any and all questions, nothing is too strange to ask. I have probably answered your question before with somebody else because I've been doing this almost 10 years now. So please reach out and I can do whatever I can to help. I can also send the link afterwards to the BC CDC radon map because, again, we're lucky in this province to have that resource. It's used, realtors use it all the time, and public health folks. And I will stop sharing now.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you again very much. And
Yes.
we've got the information, and I saw somebody writing it down, so it's good. Thanks so
Excellent.
much.
Thanks to the staff too who took on the challenge. I really
Yes.
appreciate all the effort that everybody went to because it's not just a nothing thing. So thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye. Took a little longer, but I thought that was important to hear about.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, so if we can be quiet in the gallery, please. We're still in meeting. Thank you. Right, so we'll move into our information items. I didn't provide a written report because I only had 3 items that happened between the last meeting and the deadline. So, and I'll put them on the next one, but I attended the West Transit Committee meeting and looking at the method of apportionment for fees, so that it's more equitable based on the ridership and population and the availability of service. So there's more to come on that. And then it went to Selkirk College. I actually was double booked, but I logged into one meeting and attended the meeting at Selkirk College regarding what their direction going forward is. And Councillor Leithwood has some information on that as well. So I'll leave it at that. And then the Chamber of Commerce meeting, went to that. So they did a sort of a debrief on May Days, and it was very successful. And they're planning another business walk. So they're mobilizing for that. And then joint resource recovery, library fundraising meeting, planning the carnival, which is happening on July 1st. So this is third annual, and it's been very, very successful. And then I attended the graduation ceremonies on Saturday and presented they split Kaslo's bursary into two. So two awardees were received grants from or bursaries from the village. And then I also presented on behalf of Columbia Power as a Columbia Basin Trust board member. We had our North Kootenay Lake Services Committee meeting yesterday, and CAO Baker attended that as well. And then the J.B. Humphreys book launch. So students from grades 5 to 7 interviewed Kaslo Area D locals, and they've published a very nice book. I've purchased a copy and I've just delivered it down to the library. So if you want to see it, they did a good job of their interviews, and then there were 10 of them, I think, that summarized just read the introductions to their interviews. So it was really interesting. They did an awesome job, and then attended the Abbey Manor AGM last night. And I imagine Councillor Bird might expand on that a bit, so I'll leave it. And then Selgar stakeholders call, and then the RDCK EOC policy group annual webinar for elected officials. And I see that CAO Baker has something about that in his report. So that was it for me. And any reports from members of council? Councillor Leithwaite.
To the chair. I didn't attend the Selkirk College meeting, but I did provide my feedback. So it was to let the community know that there is going to be they're trying to find some alternatives to not having a physical space here. And they feel that the public's been a little bit misinformed, because there is going to be some kind of Selkirk College presence. It's just not going to be a physical office like they had downtown, but they are looking at different different venues or different programs. Jen Lucky, who does upgrading and those kind of things, is looking at possibly working out of the school. So they are going to be in the next little while exploring other possibilities to still provide something in Kaslo. And same with the Nakus, because their office also closed down. The other meeting I attended was the community literacy, and this kind of goes along with the Selkirk College thing, that we need to find ways to communicate to people now that we only have the one paper. And so, that's part of the problem, is that there's a lack of communication and people aren't getting the right information. So trying to find some way of, an avenue for communication other than social media, because everyone is not on social media. And so we talked about the Lardo Links newsletter they have, which is really successful. And I was going to ask you, do you know where that funding came from?
I don't know whether it's probably under the, I think Director Watson might give some funding to them, but I'm not positive where it comes from. But they have different business activities that sustain links as well.
Okay. Okay. And also on July 1st, the Ladies Auxiliary also got a grant to do a heritage walk. So we're doing a heritage walk, and you can get a picture with the RCMP in their nice red serge. And then we're hoping the walk is going to be between 10 and 12, but it won't be that long. So we're hoping people will go the walk and then head down to the park for the carnival.
And then to the SS Moye, where they're
Right.
doing cupcakes again, I understand.
Yeah. Busy day.
Great. All right. Any other reports? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair. Yeah, I guess I could report on, I attended last night the AGM for the Kaslo and District Senior Shelter Society, otherwise known as Abbey Manor Group. And what I would like to say is there's quite a shift in the board. impressive. Yvonne Wentz has been on that board for 20 years. She's finally stepping down. I could see it was an emotional
Yes.
thing. And my God, that's impressive volunteers. And Thornton Chair also stepping down after 4 years, but obviously also quite committed. But what it was very well attended. The AGM and probably was 35 people there. It's pretty squashed in that seniors hall. So there's a great interest, upswell of interest. And the new board, I definitely get the impression it's been more or less stated that they're quite keen on exploring avenues for expansion. And there is a community housing fund that's coming open in September, which might be a good fit, but boy, oh boy, it's a lot of work to apply for those. But there's a lot of keenness and on the part of some of the residents at Abbey Manor, they're like, we sure need that type of housing. So it's all very positive and shout out to Yvonne for all her years of service.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you. And so we have no committee minutes and then we'll move to the CAO Baker's report. CAO Baker.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. So first point to report on is with respect to correspondence. Residents who recently submitted to the village correspondence related to the RV park were advised that their email or letter would be included in a future meeting as opposed to today's meeting. And the reason for that is council's expressed a desire to be able to discuss some of the correspondence in more detail. And typically we have full agendas already, which hasn't always provided council with a great opportunity to discuss the correspondence as well as the business items that are on the agenda. So staff are working on options and strategies to hopefully help council better serve the public and the public to feel like their correspondence is being received and understood by council. So just to put council at ease, all of the correspondence that the village has received, you've already been provided via email. So there isn't anything that's being withheld from you. You have all the information already. It just hasn't appeared on a meeting agenda. And so bear with staff and we'll provide you with more information. And there's even a bit more within the late items, a bit more detail to provide you with. Hopefully a good update with respect to our campground. I know council's expressed concern in the past with the camper down Elm, which I forget how old it is, but I'm going to say 100 years or more. And so want to make sure that it stays healthy and had an arborist come out now that there's been report of larvae. And it turns out those larvae will eventually turn into ladybugs. Forgive me for not using the scientific name, but ladybugs. And then those ladybugs are going to feed on the infestation of aphids that it has. So the plan is for the tree to be sprayed for aphids in the fall, receive its annual trim of dead limbs in the winter, and then again be sprayed for aphids in the spring. So be assured though that there's no permanent damage that's typically caused to the tree because of the aphids or the larvae from the ladybugs. But just wanted council to know we're keeping a good eye on our camper down Elm. And then an update on the Kaslo Racket Club. You'll recall that they had a turnover on their board recently, and so staff met with them today. Their inquiry was of whether the village would be interested in assuming responsibility for the operation and maintenance of that facility, the pickleball and tennis courts. And so they had various rationale. There's certain members of their board right now that aren't looking to be there long term. They're there as kind of interim members to support the group through the transition. They don't know what the future looks like for the board. They're feeling the stressors of increased insurance costs, as well as increases in the lease rate that the village applied in 2024. And what they'd really like is for the courts to be available for everyone in the public and not be secured. So right now they have to be unlocked in order for them to be accessed, and they want to do away with that. So their questions for staff were around how do we do that? Can we hand over the courts to the village? And so what staff suggested was that they put together some kind of proposal or package that can be reviewed by staff. Staff can then develop a staff report. All of that can be presented to council. Perhaps the board can come present to council and kind of plead its case for why it makes good sense for the village to take over responsibility. And of course, caution the group that it's a fairly significant increase in the level of service we currently provide. And so it's not as simple as the village takes it over and then, no big deal. The doors are open and anyone can use it. There's going to be significant costs that the village would incur and liability. You can imagine if there's ever damage, graffiti to the painted surface or the netting gets ripped, there's going to be liability and an expectation that the village steps up and repairs it. So something that council might see within the next 2 or 3 months come forward from the Racket Club. And the next item, which Mayor Hewitt touched on, was in respect to emergency preparedness. Your CAO also participated in the annual webinar that's hosted by the regional district with respect to Emergency Operations Center. And it clarified roles and responsibilities, and of course strengthened our relationship with the regional district for emergency preparedness. And the final update is with respect to our wastewater utility. You might recall that the village recently received a draft operational certificate from the ministry, and it had certain effluent thresholds that we would have to abide by. And staff met with the ministry and had to make some changes to that so that those effluent thresholds are more attainable. And probably in the next month, we'll receive that final operational certificate back, and then we'll get to work on ensuring we're in compliance. That's my update. Thank you, Mayor Hewitt.
Thank you. Are there any questions for CAO Leawood? Councillor Leawood.
Regarding the Racket Club, all of the facilities we have are run by volunteer boards. And the only reason we have those facilities is because we have volunteer boards run them. And I think it would be a lot easier on the volunteer boards to not have to do that. I mean, it's a lot of work to run baseball or the arena so I don't even know why we would even consider this, taking over their facility, running their facility when we've got all these other volunteer organizations that are doing the other facilities. And everyone's going to ask this question. That was just my little,
Okay,
guess it's not really a question.
great. And we'll move into correspondence. I do have one that I want to pull, but are there any members of council have items that they would like to pull for discussion and resolution? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, yes, I'd like to pull the one from Caitlin Zilke. He is my neighbor across the alleyway on Penny Lane, and she has 2 children and a dog. I frequently have 2 little kids and a dog or 2. And the next door neighbor has 2 little dogs, and the neighbor after that has 2 kids and a dog. And thing is, in the years since I've lived there, and my neighbors as well, is that there's this tendency for people to use that back alley as a shortcut, rather than go down Front Street. And so they'll zip along, thinking this is an nifty little shortcut. And it's dangerous because it's also, there are many businesses that use that back alley for deliveries.
Mhm.
So recognizing that the bottom of it behind the pharmacy and the top, I'm just talking of the one block in Penny Lane, and at the top behind the credit union, there's parking there and there's parking at the bottom. There's really no reason at all, if you're not a delivery truck or a resident, to be going through. So she's wondering about speed bumps and or signage. And everybody on my block who has little kids and dogs are all in agreement that something needs to be done. And I was wondering when it came for that ICBC review of the safety of our streets and the planning and the signage. If signage, for instance, we understood that ICBC would be providing the funding to upgrade our signage. And if that is imminent, or if that is something that is next year, and if one of the signs could be local traffic deliveries only. Speed bump would be great, but signage would help. And what can I tell my neighbors about how long a lead time might there be to get this addressed?
CIO Bickford?
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt, through to Councillor Byrd. So just to make sure there's no misunderstanding, there's no funding coming from ICBC. ICBC would provide signage and the village would then install the signage. So there's no funding being exchanged. As far as timelines, the ICBC report's been provided to public works staff, and then it's, they've been asked to focus on the Vimy Park area with whatever they can fit into their work plan. And I don't think there's been I know there's been no other direction given to them for any other parts of the community. What I do know is everybody in town wants speed bumps and signage and everybody to slow down. And so where does the priority rest? Well, I don't know if it's really we want the elected officials to start kind of cherry picking the ones that they want, because that's where certain people are talking to them about. I think the best thing to do is leave it up to public works and management to figure out a game plan as things come up based on, we've heard Penny Lane is an issue. We've heard, the streets adjacent to City Hall are an issue, and then kind of leave it with us to try to use our best judgment. As far as the timeline goes, I don't think we're actually going to see much movement in 2025. And I don't know what 2026 looks like, particularly as at this point, we don't have necessarily management overseeing public works directly planned for 2026. So I think just to add weight to that conversation we've been having about adequate management oversight of public works, that would help direct these kind of things.
Do you have a supplemental? I just wanted to say that MIABC will provide sometimes risk management grants. So I don't know whether they provided it for signage for other areas in the community, but they're more broadly used. So that's something to look at, there's a risk management grant application form. It doesn't say the currency of this, but MIBC still exists. So that's just type in. So that's an option if we get to that point, and they might also come and take a look. But we got to be careful what we ask them to look at, because then once they do identify risks, it's the same with the ICB one. You identify a risk, then you accept that risk exists, and you have to spend the funds to mitigate it. So we've got to be a little cautious about that, because our budgets are limited. But all right, on the same subject, go ahead.
Through the chair, one recommendation on roads I've lived on before that were high traffic, where there were little kids, in the interest of expediency, on your private property, a sign, they're usually pretty big and they're a little playful and colorful, and they say children at play or something of that nature. And I know they always catch my eye, and anytime I see them, I'm usually driving really slow, but I will crawl by them. And it might be a good thought just for like a stopgap until like something more can be done, just to immediately address it and kind of create more safety around it.
And people do become sign blind. right? Because you got your standard signage and people, oh, well, they don't even pay attention to them after a while. So those, like you said, that would stand out more, and it brings attention to the fact that there are children on the street, so. All right, any other items? Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair, this is just a question. So the correspondence, some of them, they're asking the village to do certain things. Do they automatically get a response? Or only if we pull and ask for an action?
Through the chair to Councillor Leithwood, typically staff will acknowledge receipt of their email or letter, and it could die there unless council provides direction for some action to be taken. And so one of the things, staff don't feel comfortable with that. They personally feel like we should be offering a response, even to say, you know, council hasn't done anything or decided not to take any action on this. Or it's been provided to staff for action. One of the things I'm hoping to talk about as one of the late items is how we can handle correspondence better and provide responses to the public to give them the sense that they're being heard. So.
Okay.
Are there any of the items that you wanted staff to specifically look at?
I was thinking of the letter regarding the noise complaint. I believe I just had a couple of questions about our bylaw. I believe we did redo our noise bylaw a few years ago, right? So I was trying to remember. I mean, the day that the complainant is talking about, there was a party at the Angry Hen. It was a pride party. It was pretty lively, but it was mostly people having a good time. It wasn't necessarily the music that was super loud. And in my experience, because I live right behind the Angry Hen, their music always stops at 10. They follow that pretty closely. But I was just trying to remember if I thought we had looked at the noise bylaw a few years ago and tried to accommodate some of what she's saying in that letter.
Any others? The one from Walker regarding the no parking, that is an issue. So going down from the cenotaph down into the bay, and because I work down there, and you probably see it as well, Councillor Brown, but there are quite frequently large vehicles that will park because there's a lovely picnic, a lovely bench there that you can sit at and look out over the water. But if there's no parking behind on Water Street, or they don't go and find, people won't walk the half a block or the block that it takes to get over town. So is there a desire or any interest on behalf of council to have that looked at, whether we should post signage? Because it could be a hazard, because it does tighten it up in there quite significantly. And as the writer pointed out, that the people going down sometimes with large boats in tow, if they're trying to pass between vehicles on either side, we can't access the water in our boat launch. So, but just give direction to staff to look into what we could do to alleviate that. Okay, all right. Is that sufficient, or do you want a resolution? Just to see what the options might be for that.
Yeah, through the chair, generally my sense is staff capacity is we don't have any. And so I'm cautious to commit to taking a look at it, knowing that it's very unlikely that it's going to hit the priority list in 2025. We have one manager, and we don't have anyone else to kind of take a good look at this and think about it and kind of provide a solid recommendation. So I'm just cautious to commit to doing something knowing that we aren't going to hit the mark. That doesn't mean council can't pass a resolution and it can stay on the list. It's just, I don't know when we would get to it.
To the chair. I wonder if any of this would fit under the accessibility committee. I mean, access to like down to the bay, or not necessarily access for handicapped or anything, but if there's people parked on that side, you can't access down into the bay. I don't know. Like, do you think it would fit at all? We could maybe at least talk about it.
It would, honestly, it would get.
I know.
Back to
It
staff.
would, but maybe we could do some, like, we could talk about it and like make some recommendations to staff eventually. I mean, I don't know when we're gonna have another accessibility committee meeting, but probably not through the summer anyway. But that would save staff having to look at it. Anyway, just a thought.
Anyone have a resolution to propose or? So, and then the item that I wanted to have discussion on is the last one where, this is the first time that we personally have, well, I personally have received an invitation from the Tanaha
Yeah, I can-
and their, nation annual general assembly at Ockham. And wondered if I could make it work. No, I'm not saying that I can definitely go, because there's a few things that have to fall into place, but I think it would be a really good opportunity to do some relationship building with our Indigenous neighbors. So CEO Baker has written a resolution for me that the mayor be authorized to attend the 2025 Tanaha Nation Annual General Assembly. Moved by Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Bird. Any discussion? Oh, I guess with expenses paid pursuant to municipal policy. That's what the ... is. All right, so all those in favor? Motion is carried. And part of making this work is the dates that it is, Councillor Lang, are over the board week. So are you, that's part of it. Are you available on the 16th and 17th of July to attend both the joint resource recovery in the afternoon on the Wednesday and the board meeting on the Thursday?
I am.
Okay, excellent. That's one thing, one hurdle jumped. Thank you. Councillor Leakwood.
To the chair. This would be a good use of our Indigenous relations money, that grant that we got, because we kept some from South, right? So we could use the travel budget, but that is a good use of that. So it's
Okay.
not-
Have we received that installment?
Through the chair, we have funds available. Certainly have funds available that can be applied.
Okay. All right. So then the next is the UBCM convention appointment book. Are there, has council been able to give to any minister meetings that they would like us to book? Councillor Leakwood.
To the chair. I had sent that information, that bulletin from the Rural Health Network, and it had those 2 points that they're recommending to the province about travel, medical travel.
Okay.
And I had sent them to say, could we possibly turn these into a resolution for the UBCM? But you had mentioned maybe it's too late for that.
I think, yeah, I thought the resolution deadline was somewhere in the spring, because they go from AKBLG to
Through that.
BCM, and I think that deadline is already passed because it's just about the end of June.
Anyway, I just thought if in lieu of doing a resolution, maybe we could meet with the Minister of Health and encourage them to, because one of their recommendations is to come up with a comprehensive travel medical sort of plan for people from rural areas to get to medical appointments. So that could be something there were two things in there. I can't remember what the other one was, but they were both health related and both, they're from the rural network, so rural health. Let's see if I can find, I sent it last week, I think. It was the newsletter that the summary of their findings.
All right, well, while you're looking for that, I did forward a couple to CAO Baker and just sent them to Lee as well. So he has generally what they are. But the three MLAs, somebody, I said that to somebody and they thought I was saying Emily's, three Emily's, MLAs, are attending the West Kootenai Boundary Regional Hospital District meeting on Thursday night in Castlegar. And that was something that I suggested at the January meeting. And so they will be attending, and we may have Minister Ma attend virtually. I haven't heard back for sure, but a couple of the questions that I submitted that I thought perhaps we could turn into meeting requests would be advocating for the construction and staffing of additional assisted living facilities and long-term care beds for rural seniors so they can stay closer to their family and friends to prevent social isolation as they age. And then asking if they will assist in advocating for better rural health care transportation options, including but not limited to a funding increase for the Health Connections funding program through BC Transit, with funding being targeted specifically at residents living in more rural and remote parts of the region, since there's not enough service being provided outside the main transportation routes. Is that essentially what that, I haven't read that, but
Yeah, both, they're pretty, both,
both in there?
yeah.
Okay.
Pretty well in line with what you're just saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for ourselves, I think we should go back, and especially in light of the change in the board for the Kaslo and District Senior Citizen Shelter Society, that they might bring new energy, as you said, and willingness to move forward with the project. So if we can perhaps meet with the ministers and advocate at the same time for that additional service, because I know they like us to come with solutions. If we could, for that organization, give them a bit of time to settle in, but I know that they do have plans that were drawn up that would need to be updated, but at least there's that intent that we're asking for funding for additional facilities, both expansion at Abbey Manor and for the additional 10 beds that the hospital expansion committee is interested in. So we could try that again, because the last time I brought that up, it was as a West Kootenai Boundary Regional Hospital District member, not as a council member. So we followed up with the plans, but it wasn't the purpose of the meeting. So maybe if we're coming with a package that says these are very viable options that could be easily actioned because the land is there, servicing is available for expansion at Abbey Manor. So, and the services are available already at the Victorian Health Center. So, just whether we give direction to staff to request meetings with, I guess it would be Minister of Health on both of them. And maybe, what is it? Transportation and transit for the transportation one, but that's not Kaslo specific. So I would think we would want to aim more at at the housing one, because we do know that that is a big need in our community for all ages, so. That's,
Mhm.
well, I'm gonna make a motion, somebody, or I can make a motion that we, just for that one, the housing. Okay, okay. So I'll make the motion if somebody will second that. Um, is that enough information in that, what I sent?
We will.
We can work
Yes, it
together.
is. We will.
We'll work together and figure it out. But at the meeting with the minister,
Yeah.
Minister of the Health, and hopefully she will attend on Thursday night. Actually, it sounded like she might. No, it's one of the MLAs wasn't going to make it in time, it was for dinner, but anyhow. All right, Councillor Leakwood. Actually, we moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Oh, I can't ask a question. It's about
Oh,
the meeting with the health minister.
oh, okay, yeah.
Does it have to be a single item? Because one of them maybe won't necessarily fit with talking to him, because it is about the transit, but the comprehensive health plan for out of community medical travel would fit.
Right. That's probably more one those were ones that I'm reading. They're the questions that I posed to the ministers to answer on Thursday night. So whether that's something that we can actually advocate for as a community, it's more of a regional thing. We can see if it would work with in combination with the regional district or the health board. Because I think that is on our list for our hospital board meetings at UBCM this year as well.
Okay.
So, and then we'll see if I'll ask all three of them. We've asked them. One of my questions was also if they will support us at the meetings and the projects going forward. So, trying to work at it from all different angles. But I don't know, do we think that we could present a good enough case on rural transportation that it makes it a value for them to meet with us? Because
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of examples of it falling apart, like people having to stay overnight in trail because they can't get back, and paying out of pocket. There's a limited amount of money they can get that doesn't cover the expenses. I mean, we've been talking about it a lot at the hospital auxiliary. So we've got tons of, statements from people that have said it's just a nightmare for them to try and, they get to Nelson, but that's as far as they can get. And they've had to take taxis that cost $160. So I'm pretty sure as a community, we can make a pretty good case. Trail is 2 hours away and Kelowna is 5.
right.
So
I guess given staff capacity, would you'd be able to, work with the Hospital Auxiliary Society to put together some background? Because I know that the briefings are just like a paragraph now, so it's not like a big briefing, but if we have some material to take down as well.
I can get some.
Does that help? If we can, you can request the meeting and then have Councillor Leithwood work with the group to put together some background to take, and we can just send it along. But they do, from the sessions that I did in February, they do like, if you're bringing a problem, they like you to bring potential solution as well. So, so do we also want to meet? So that would be IHA mostly, or Ministry of Transportation and Transit?
I'm not sure if the rural health work specifically said they just said they were sending it to the provincial government, their recommendations. I don't know if they specifically said what branch of the government. If I can find the letter. Okay. Anyway, I can put some information together.
So we can maybe just request that you will get back to staff, but
Mhm.
we request a meeting with the relevant ministries,
Mhm.
that topic. And then you will get them the information.
Mhm.
Okay. Right. So we'll add that one too, if that's okay with council. Yeah. All right. Was there anything else before we move on? Thank you. So we are at question period. Are there any questions from members of the public? Bill, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I could,
Is that okay if I speak from here, or do you want me to go up to the
let's see.
testing? 1, 2?
Yes. So I see Dawn on there. Can you just indicate whether you can hear? Bill, all right?
Can you hear me, Dawn? Up there.
Oh,
There's a picture.
okay.
Well,
All right. Laura, can you hear then?
I'll stand up, I suppose, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sort of mystified about this business about, putting names issue and working and whatnot, and what the process is. Well, I guess my question is, why is it the process to get a sign in a place where there's danger? Why does it take 2 years? Why is it, I said, it's a problem of capacity, but I'm thinking of, an intersection in our neighborhood where there's been 2 accidents this year. Somebody got hurt. The corner of Carroll, the intersection of Carroll and Partners. And, it, it's a, it's, does it need to be taken up by the private residents there to say that there's limited visibility? We need to watch for pedestrians, or what? I just don't understand in this small town why there's not a process for making something that's I think is an urgent problem. Why does it take 2 years or longer? I mean, I have earlier this year, you asked about putting a sign at that particular location. And of course, I've not heard anything back about that, except that I'll pass them on to staff. So my question is, why does it take so long? There's gotta be a process to make it so it happens so people aren't getting hurt.
That is, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give that one to you, CAO Baker, because that's an operational kind of request, not unless, I guess we could help, but we,
Council say this is a problem or something needs to be fixed.
well, we don't always see all of the requests, because those types of things are typically operational. Is that correct?
I think it was April when I went in with that request, so.
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with the request that's being talked about. Is this related to Councillor Bird's?
No.
Kind of earlier, no, they're not. Yeah, I'm not familiar with
Okay.
what the request is about.
Does it need to be a written request?
Was it a written request that you submitted or a verbal?
No, I came to the calendar, but
Okay,
I've also made another request about having a meeting with the CAO about another issue, which I think is also an important issue, but I haven't heard anything back about that either.
so I guess it's just how if it's a verbal request, it's a little harder to act on just because it's from your mouth to somebody else's ears, and then they have to relay what they think that what your issue is that you're describing. So it's probably best if you do write specifics and put it in writing,
Okay.
rather than relying on a verbal conversation, because staff is busy at the front counter and many things can be happening at the same time. So they'll have gone from a conversation with you to dealing with somebody else, taking a utility payment or something. So it's I think it's unfair to leave that on the member of staff who's at the front counter to remember each conversation and the appropriate person to relay it to.
I hear what you're saying, but there's, on the agenda tonight, there's a letter about Penny Lane. And he says it's gonna maybe 2026, so we'll get to it. So I just don't think that that's good. I think that there ought to be some way in process in this village to be able to actually deal with these situations more expediently than 2 years.
Okay, well, that's noted, Bill. Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone online? Okay, I see Jessie with her hand raised. Go ahead, Jessie.
Hi. Okay. Thank you. I apologize. I wasn't able to hear the last council meeting, so I apologize if this was already addressed or if this question was answered. This is just a specific question about the South Beach development. I am trying to understand my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the developer's plan is either 100% or close to 100% strata. Is that correct?
That's what's been presented, yes.
Okay. So my question to you all is pretty simple. If it is all strata, does the community have any guarantee that we would benefit from any overflow camping that I've heard you all as council members talk about that as one of the potential benefits to our community of moving through with the land transfer with the developer. And I'm curious and concerned that we might be engaging with this on the hope that that's true. But if it's all strata, am I not correct that we really have no guarantee that we would get any extra seasonal camping for the community?
Well, council has made the motion to move forward with the advertising, but we are still have to have our meeting regarding terms and conditions for that sale. So we're not at that stage yet where anything is written in stone. So we would be just speculating at this point because it would be a negotiation with the developer. And we as council haven't met to discuss. We've all submitted our ideas or our suggestions to the CAO, and we're just trying to find a date to have that meeting where we'll discuss them as a council and decide what we're going to include in the terms and conditions for a future sale or potential future sale.
I see.
So I can't answer your question right now. Because that could be
I
a
guess I'm not even
negotiating-
asking what the village is negotiating. I'm asking, is that just sort of a factual distinction that if it is strata, that we can't guarantee camping for the community because it would be owned privately? Is that right?
We don't know.
Oh,
Because we'll also
so
be
you could
one of the
could you
conditions-
potentially, yeah.
One of the conditions in that will be the RV park bylaw. And there could be things that we would put into that. So there are many steps that are still to be undertaken, and we're not there yet at all. There is still further council input into the next phases if we go further along the
So it
path.
is possible that that could be one of the negotiations that you say, if it's strata, you would need to ask your owners that they allow for a certain percentage of camping time in the season or something to the public. Is that right?
Well, it would be, we could certainly, if that was what council wished.
You
that
could ask
could
for
be-
that.
We could ask, yeah.
I see.
Because
Okay.
I think at this point, almost everything is on the table.
Sure. I was just curious. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I can take one more question. Anne, go ahead.
I recall at a meeting in May that Councillor Leithwood was reassured that when the notice of disposition of land was advertised, the public would have an opportunity to provide feedback. Is it not presumptive of council to be in tandem discussing terms and conditions to a purchase and sale agreement when you haven't heard the feedback pursuant to the notice of disposition?
Well, I think, honestly, we've had feedback. The public has known that the potential sale is on the table. That's been known since the start. So there has been numerous items of correspondence regarding the sale. And normally an advertisement triggers, you could have more feedback if you wish. If it will, whether it's different or not than what's already been received, because like I said, it hasn't been a secret that was going to be potentially part of it, is the sale of the rights of way. So I don't think the public has been disallowed at this point any feedback on the potential sale. When we put notice in the paper regarding any subject, whether it's a bylaw amendment or the purchase or the sale of land, that always it's the trigger that we're seeking public input. So until that advertisement actually hits the paper, which it hasn't yet, because we've got to allow staff time to do that and work with the planner, the solicitor that we engaged to see. That's where it's at right now, I believe, is just getting the appropriate wording, because it's specific lots and we have to have it posted correctly. Did I say that right? So take all that with a grain of salt, but I'm pretty sure that that is what the process will be and why we haven't yet advertised the disposition.
Yeah, so through the chair, just to add some, to simplify things a little, the notice of disposition, is to let the public know what council intends to do. And council wouldn't sign a purchase and sale agreement until after the notice of disposition has been issued. And so the public has time between now and the time that the public purchase and sale agreement is signed to provide input to council. I think that's the simplest way of looking at it. It's not that the notice of disposition provides the public with some extra opportunity. It's just that council has to issue notice of disposition and then will not sign a purchase and sale agreement until that happens.
Right. Thank you. All right, so do we want to take a brief break before we go into the business part of our meeting? Because we've still got several items of business, and then a bit of an in-camera session, so I will call her. I'll say we'll take a brief recess.
Anyway, so I won't be long, and you can read the report and get the gist of it yourselves. Just thought I'd highlight one thing in particular. In 2023, there were 12 objectives that the village accomplished. And in 2024, there was 32 objectives that the village accomplished. And I thought I'd just add some context to it. Sounds good, but it deserves context. One thing that's different from 2023 to 2024 was the way in which your strategic priorities were broken apart. We unpacked them into tasks that could then be completed so that council could see progress was being made. So even though the big item might not have been accomplished, it might take a couple of years or more to accomplish, you can see that tasks are being accomplished. And so it gives you the sense that work is being done. So that's one of the reasons why there's an increase in the number of objectives that were accomplished. But the biggest one would be that you had a manager of strategic initiatives performing the work. In previous year, in 2023, you didn't. And so less work was getting done. So more work being done primarily due to the fact that you had a position doing it, which again, just to highlight for council that a decision will have to be made going into 2026 on what you do, because you could then see that the amount of work you would get done is going to be decreased in 2026 since your manager of strategic initiatives contract will expire. And that's it. Thank you, Mary Hewitt.
You're welcome. Are there any questions arising from the annual report? Councillor Bird.
Through the chair, nice looking report. Congratulations. Nice letter.
Thank you.
Introduction. Just permissive tax exemptions. Of course, I would notice this, but Kaslo Housing Society is placed under municipally owned properties, nonprofit occupier. But in 2024, it was not on municipally owned property. That sale had gone through in 2023 for $10. For everyone to know, the village sold that piece of property for $10 to the Kaslo Housing Society. But that happened in 2023. In 2024, the Kaslo Housing Society paid full taxes, something like $9,000 on that piece of property. There was no tax exemption. So I'm wondering why it's listed at the paltry sum of $361.96. As for we paid taxes in 2024, we paid all the taxes. There was no permissive tax exemption. It was only a 1 year or a 2 year, 2022, 2023 deal. And in 2024, that permissive tax exemption had been taken away. So just wondering why it's listed as A, municipally owned property, and B, that there was a permissive tax exemption in 2024. However small.
Through the chair, I'm not too sure I'm following, and I don't have that page opened up. So if you give me time for my computer to open it up.
Councillor Lee, good.
To the chair. Isn't part of it that only a certain portion could be exempt?
Didn't know that through the chair. Did not know that in 2024 we paid full taxes.
But nothing that was like any fair market value couldn't be exempt.
We only found that out 1 year late.
So that's probably not an annual report question other than the misapplication, the putting it in the wrong place. But your discussion with the level of it should be taken up perhaps with staff afterwards. Because if it's reporting what was fact,
Yeah.
then that is what it is. But if it does need to be moved to a different place.
So what are we, sorry, what are we looking at? What's the,
Permissive tax exemptions is, I'm trying to find the page numbers.
okay, I'm looking at the permissive
Okay.
tax exemptions.
So, there's a section, the second section down, municipally owned properties, nonprofit occupier. So we're talking 2024. In 2024, the sale, the $10 sale had gone through, but that was 2023.
Sorry, what property are we talking about?
Penny Lane,
But what is,
Kaslo Housing Society.
and so the question is, how come there's only $361.96 being exempt?
It should be zero and it shouldn't be an entry in that section at all.
So, this information comes from the BC Assessment Authority. I can double check that some error wasn't made, but
It's clear that it was not a municipally owned property in 2024.
there could be an error in the way it's categorized. I don't know if there's an error in the value of the exemption. I suspect there's not.
There was no exemption.
So the taxation value that you would have been charged, it's based on 2023 when they assess it, right? So it was basically nothing in 2023, right? That's when that assessed value is determined for taxation for the next year, for 2024. So that probably is accurate because we wouldn't have been taxing on a completed, constructed building.
Yeah.
So that's probably why it's lower.
In June of 2024, we did not have a tax exemption. So when we paid 2024 taxes, we paid the full taxes. So I'm not sure why. This is mine. It doesn't affect anybody, but it's just like I'm looking at what appears to be an error because there was no tax exemption granted in 2024 to the Kaslo Housing Society.
So I think it's more something that we need to take offline than to hash it out
Yep.
now because the staff doesn't have everything at their fingertips right now. We're in the middle of a meeting. So the placement in the report, that certainly is, if it's incorrect, right? If it's, which is true, it's not a municipally owned built flat lot anymore. So that is valid to raise. And that could be changed, could it not? Because we have to accept the report and then before it gets finalized. Almost. Yes, no?
Through the chair, I'm not too sure what to say. I believe the annual report needs to be provided to the province by June 30th. And so if there's some errors that need to be corrected, there's still time. As far as council needing to adopt it, not too sure exactly what the legislation says. I'd have to look it up. But I don't think there's anything that precludes us from making minor amendments after today's meeting.
Through the chair, if it's an issue, it doesn't really matter to me, or I don't think it matters to many. I did notice it and it does look like an error and also notice the, note 4 at the bottom also does not quite agree with, the listing above. But I'm not sure who reads that small print anyway, and it doesn't matter to who.
So are you looking at the Sophie report or are you looking at the annual report?
The annual report,
Okay.
Village of Kaslo Annual Report 2024. But,
So what's the issue with note 4?
oh, it says, okay, statutory exemptions in a community charter, are not listed for example, Victorian Community Health Center, Kaslo District Public Library, building and land set aside for public worship. But you just have to go up to look for this section that says land surrounding buildings for public worship. So they are listed.
Yeah, so through the chair, nothing's incorrect. It's true. There's statutory exemptions for churches. So what you're looking at are permissive tax exemptions related to land surrounding the building.
Okay.
The building has a statutory exemption. The land surrounding it does not, has a permissive tax exemption.
It does say building and land set aside for public worship.
So then,
Take the word building out, you're good.
no. So parts of the building are not necessarily receiving a statutory exemption.
Okay.
And parts of the land that they own are not necessarily receiving a statutory exemption.
Okay.
So the recommendation is that the Village of Kaslo's 2024 annual report be adopted. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Leithwood. Any further discussion? In favor? Carried. Next one is the statement of financial information. Speak to that one at all, CEO Baker, or it's essentially there's a bit more information in it, but it's the required information that has to be reported regarding remuneration and the largest vendors and that type of thing, which gets added to the financials. Are there any questions regarding that? All right. None. The recommendation is that the village's 2024 statement of financial obligation be adopted. By Councillor Lang, seconded by Councillor Bird. Just for discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. Next item, 7.3, is temporary license of occupation for the Kaslo Saturday Market. So this is for us to consider authorizing a temporary license of occupation for the library lot, we'll call it that. So the recommendation is that a temporary license of occupation be issued to the Kaslo Community Services for use of 445 Front Street to accommodate overflow vendors during their Saturday market on August 2nd, 2025. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Leithwood. Discussion? All those in favor? Is carried. And then 7.4, contract award for the ultraviolet treatment system installation. Are there any questions for staff before I read the recommendation? The recommendation is that Filtrum Incorporated be awarded the tender for the water treatment plant ultraviolet disinfection upgrade, all for the tendered price of $377,400, excluding applicable taxes. And further, that staff be authorized to execute the contract. By Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Lang. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. Next item is a purchasing policy. This is a new one, so Phil Baker, speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor Hewitt. Just to provide some information that might not be explicitly stated in the staff report or the proposed amendments. So staff have met with local suppliers who have a keen interest in these policy amendments. They were under the impression that there was a buy local type policy that the village was following, and that was true. The village has always had that type of flavor to its policy directives or even its policies, but it applied specifically to purchases that the village was making. It didn't flow through to purchases that our contractors were making. And so the essence of this amendment is to ensure that there's contractors who are also encouraged to at least get quotations from local suppliers. And so staff will be following up with those local businesses that had a keen interest in this policy. We'll be meeting with them on Thursday to explain the policy and the changes that are being proposed. And at this point, it seems like they're agreeable to what staff have recommended, but certainly we'll come back to council if there's further adjustments that they would like. It's certainly open to council's commentary on their thoughts.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? Recommendation then is that the village's procurement and asset disposal policy be amended to include local supplier engagement requirements as presented in the staff report titled Purchasing Policy Local Supplier Engagement Requirement dated June 19th, 2025. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Lang. Discussion. All those in favor? It's carried. So now recommendation is that council now resolve into that committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Leafwood, by Councillor Bird. All those in favor? It's carried. And first item, now I did that ahead of.
Yeah, no, you did it right. Yeah.
That's good. So first item in our committee of the whole for discussion is dog control bylaw. Now, did you want to speak to that, or can I let Councillor Bird introduce it, since that was something that she had raised with C.A.L. Baker and myself? Did you want to speak on that?
Sure, I can speak to that. So through the chair, just because I've become aware of people that were injured by vicious dogs, and it's very upsetting. And the person I'm thinking about has got a permanent injury. So I said I'd bring it up because the issue here is we do have a dog control bylaw. And it's not nothing wrong with that bylaw that I can see. There's it's got enough detail and enough the methodology, like for dealing with dogs, is all is spelled out. That the issue is enforcement. We do not have a bylaw enforcement officer, and it's not just dogs, but other, we hear mostly through Facebook on community web complaints about this, that, the other thing, and isn't there a bylaw? And yes, in most cases, not all, there is a bylaw. So the only thing that I would like to ask is understanding, that having a bylaw officer who would enforce such a bylaw, such as the dog control bylaw. Of course, that would be adding to the services that we provide. And currently, we do not provide that service. We do not pay for it. And the last time we tried to hire someone to do bylaw enforcement, it didn't work out. We tried to hire a 75% fire chief and 25% bylaw enforcement, and it did not excite anybody, and no one applied. So, but I was wondering if there is any history of sharing a bylaw enforcement officer with the RDCK or any other mechanisms, if we contemplate bringing that level of service up so that we do have a bylaw officer. Is there any history that we have that of sharing the service either with another community or with a surrounding RDCK?
If you're talking specifically by law enforcement,
Yes.
then no. We did have, if you don't mind me jumping in, because I probably know more than you do, C.O. Baker, but we did engage bylaw, not a bylaw enforcement officer, but an animal control officer, and who was also working as a bylaw enforcement and animal control officer with the regional district. But we got very limited service, and wasn't because they weren't resident in the community, were not able to react, because many of these complaints are very urgent at the time. If you can't catch the animal or the person doing the misdeed, then you really can't do anything well unless somebody's got photographic evidence that something has happened, right? They photographed a dog who's at large and is being vicious. So there was no real utility. We were paying, about $12,000 a year, which may not seem like a lot, but when you're not really getting service, if you've got to call somebody from an hour away, so that sharing isn't really feasible for the animal control part. We did have a local animal control officer, but as you said, on Facebook, it works the other way as well. People were actively saying the animal control officer is out, bring Rover in, so Rover won't get caught. The thing to remember with all bylaw enforcement is it is supposed to apply to everyone, not just to the people you don't like. It applies equally to everyone. So if you have an at-large dog, your dog should be treated the same as somebody else's dog who's also a problem and is at large. So, and it does bring up an extra level of service, and it would be a unionized position at, $50,000 to $60,000 annually. And like I said, many of those things you have to act in the moment. That's my view, but we have to be willing to go as council, willing to accept that the public has to accept that that's the level of service that they want and that they're willing to pay for it. And it has to be applied universally. So there will be people who, may be friends and that they are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And if they're caught, then they will be penalized the same as anyone else. Whether you're new to town or you've been here for a long time, it doesn't matter. We should be treating everybody equally in that regard. Councillor Leafwood?
To the chair. The other problem we had with the dog animal control is nowhere to put the dogs once they're caught.
Yeah.
And we had a place for a long time, but then that was at the vet and then they quit doing it. Then we had someone else who was taking it to their home, but then they quit doing it. So there's nowhere to put the dogs. They were being brought into Nelson and people were not picking them up because they had to pay an impound fee. So, yeah, it was hard to.
If somebody, if a resident of the village does experience a vicious dog, what should they do? And I know that they should report to the RCMP. Is there anything else? I mean, because we do have a bylaw, should they be reporting here as well? And report the RCMP? And does anyone have any idea if there's follow-up on the part of the RCMP?
Well, I would think that if we're also getting the report, and then, if there's multiple reports for the same animal, and we know it's the same animal and it has bitten multiple people, we can act on it, or we can ask the RCMP to, because there is, even in, I think provincially, there is a statute regarding that. So I know when we did have an animal control officer, we did at one point declared a dog as vicious, and the owner had to have it on a leash at all times or muzzled when it was out in public, and they had to construct a large fence. The animal could not escape because it did have a history of vicious attacks. So, but it's a big step, and yeah. And I think the dog ended up destroyed in the end. So it can be done if it's truly a vicious animal, and if it's the same one, and yeah.
So through the chair, highly important, report it.
Yeah.
Report it here, report it to the RCMP.
Yeah, I would say so, because we don't have the bylaw enforcement, and actually, even if we had someone, do we want them to go and deal with a highly vicious animal if they're, you know, unless they're really trained to deal with animals of that sort. I would have trouble telling somebody to put themselves in harm's way. If it's a reported vicious animal, you'd want to get somebody who is qualified to deal with them and capable. But it is a question of whether, you know, we want to further the discussion through our strategic planning, I think, because we're partway through the year where we'd have to hire someone and amend the budget, find money. So if there's a desire to continue the discussion and perhaps consider it for 2026, we can refer the matter to you know, strategic planning or at least a budget discussions. If that's what you wish, Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair, could we put on Facebook that we do have an animal control bylaw where we do have tickets for infractions to that? Like maybe people don't know that they can be ticketed for certain types of thing under that bylaw. I mean, if we get a complaint.
Gonna send staff, we would be sending.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking if we could put on social media that we have an animal control bylaw, that if certain things happen and we get complaints, then the staff, do you send tickets out to them if we get complaints? That's how it used to be.
Through the chair, I don't think I get been here long enough to comment on whether the village has issued fines. All I know is we've reminded owners when we believe they might have violated the bylaw, we've let them know that we have an animal control bylaw and what the fines would be if they were assessed a fine. But yeah, I can't comment on if we've actually ever issued fines.
I think we have, because I know people that have gotten them. I don't know whether they've paid them, but.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. I think this, and similar to other conversations we've had today and throughout this term, it comes down to public safety. I think that anytime we're looking at issues of public safety, that takes priority. Keeping the public safe, you know, is paramount. And so I also recognize that the cost of bylaw enforcement would be an additional taxation at a time where we're already stressed coming from other areas. But I would suggest that we put this into strategic planning to see if it's something that we could find a feasible solution for, because it does seem like more and more often the necessity of that bylaw enforcement is happening. And it's great to have the bylaws, but if they're not being followed and they're not being looked after and people aren't being held to account of them, then they lose all effectiveness. And so pointing out to people that we have a bylaw doesn't really help them feel more safe around a vicious dog or in a situation they feel is unsafe. So I would personally suggest that when matters of public safety come across our table, that we prioritize that at the top. And I would suggest that if the next time where we could speak about this in a manner where we could put either budget to it or figure out what steps we'd like to take, would be at a strategic planning. And I think that would be a good exercise, if only that, and perhaps more.
You moved to put in the school strategic plan with seconder of that? Sure. Okay. So we'll just discussion on the merits of referral, not the item anymore, but just on the merits of referral. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor? Motion passes. Right, at 8.2, council procedures bylaw. Do you speak to that?
Mayor Hewitt. So what staff are proposing is a review of the council procedures bylaw with specific attention given to how we handle delegations and question period, as well as correspondence. So, you know, tonight's meeting might be a good example. might have spent something like 45 minutes talking about correspondence that wasn't part of the formal agenda, but became part of the meeting. And that can impact how much time is then left to talk about items that are actually on the agenda and were supposed to be talked about. So correspondence in particular, delegations, we know we've had challenges with groups looking to be a delegation. And yet, it might not necessarily be something that council's interested in. Might not be related to your strategic priorities, and you could end up with the same group coming over and over and over again, talking about the same topics, but really it's not to council's advantage to be listening because it doesn't relate to any business item they're talking about or what your strategic priorities are. And so I think there needs to be some kind of review by council where you seriously think about how do you want to control what happens at your council meetings, and the council procedures bylaws, how you do it. And your CAO is not the person to provide you with a ton of experience on how to structure a procedures bylaw. And so I'd like to suggest that a consultant's brought in who does have expertise in this area and can explain to you how your current bylaw is set up and what some of the hazards are with the way it's worded, and provide you with options on adjustments that you might make. And so unless council has any major concerns, staff's plan is to try to coordinate that meeting to occur in the second or third week of July and see if we can make some improvements. Again, it's to help council, but certainly also to help serve the public better and give them the sense that council's listening to their feedback. And with the mayor's permission, I might jump ahead to 8.3 as well, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
So the RV park proposal process, there's a couple of items to put before council. One is to determine whether council is interested in the village issuing a public facing document in an attempt to correct some of the misinformation that has been circulating about the RV park proposal. So the OCP process or zoning, as well as certain the decision-making process of council, as well as certain terms that are in the draft purchase and sale agreement. So perhaps I can turn it over to council to discuss whether there's an interest in having that public-facing document, something like for the record.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, I think the more transparency and information that we share with the public, the better. I think that if there is information that's out there that isn't correct, then it only benefits us to correct it. I also think that it gives the public a more clear understanding of the information that's actually out there and the position of the village or council. So I think having a document like such as this would only be a benefit. It also provides our constituents an opportunity to be able to review that and either have information corrected or understand that perspective of which the lens is being placed on the subject. So I would be in favor of that.
Councillor Leadwood.
To the chair. I agree. I think that there is a lot of misinformation out there, although there is a ton of information that we have provided. So I think it's good, but I don't think it should be used as an opportunity for more public engagement. I mean, we have given out a lot of information over the last 20 months, and it really seems like it's become a debate with council and the public rather than a debate with council and the proponent, which is what it actually should be. We're here to debate his proposal for his property, but it's turned into a debate with the public about whether or not it should happen. We obviously need public input. So I agree that we need to correct information, but I don't want it to delay the process anymore. We've made a resolution to move forward with the purchase and sale agreement, and we can still advertise the intent to sell the land. and work on the agreement, but I feel like we need to move forward. It's really taken up a lot of council's time and we need to keep going and start doing other business in the village.
Their comment on the document that's being referred to? Councillor Bird?
Through the chair. Identifying the misinformation that should be addressed is, would you be, if staff is going to correct the misinformation, which pieces of misinformation would you like our help in identifying the ones that bother us particularly, and then pieces of misinformation that we've either seen in the paper or online or directly from friends, where you might need our help in identifying the misinformation that might be out there. Would you like our help on that one?
Through the chair, Councillor Bird, absolutely. It would be good to have council's input on exactly what you'd like to see. And given the given timelines, you know, probably wouldn't be able to issue something until the third week of July-ish. So you have time. If you'd like to send an email to staff, that would be appreciated. But maybe before we go that far, if council doesn't mind, it'd be good to have a resolution. And I can propose a verbiage if it makes sense, just so that we have a record of council providing the direction to staff and make sure there's consensus that all of council actually wants this to be issued would be good. Or if it wishes, we can develop the document and then seek a resolution at the July meeting, whatever makes sense for council.
I'll move that we prepare it for the July meeting if possible.
Staff prepare it for the July meeting or just that it, so we've got to have a goal in mind. So
Right.
have it released prior to the July meeting or for council review at the July meeting, I guess is it released prior to or?
If it's possible, prior to, so that we can provide the information at the July 22nd meeting for the public, because there won't be another meeting until August, the end of August after that. So if it's possible to have that information, I mean, I think, you know, we're pretty aware of the information that's out there. Like we have been talking about it for quite a while. So I think we're all pretty aware of some of the misinformation. We just have to look at the letters that we've received. As long as staff has time to do that.
Yeah, through the chair, staff will find time before the July council meeting, and sounds like it makes sense to issue this as a public notice, so to speak. Not exactly a public notice, but issue it to the public at around the time of the July meeting versus it coming to council for discussion at the July meeting, if I understand correctly. And so maybe we can just clarify the motion that Councillor Leithwood put forward would be that the village issue a public facing document to correct some of the misinformation related to the proposed RV park.
Mhm.
And then
Good.
we haven't put a date on it, but council will take that as immediate action if there's a second and any discussion.
Seconded by Councillor Bird. Okay, discussion. And I saw your hand, Councillor Brown.
Through the chair, with the already stated issues around finding venues to put this information, now that the Pennywise is no longer in print, how do we intend on getting this information to the public in a way that they'll be able to access it if they don't use a computer?
So one likely logical place would be our bulletin board because that we're in control of that. Councillor Bird? Yeah.
I was gonna say bulletin board.
Yes, it's hard to see where else that it could go. That, I'll just mention that the regional district is now issuing a digital newsletter, but maybe we, if we, because we're struggling with staff capacity because it's busy right now, but, even if there was an email, is there an emails list that we can send notices to, right? Or could we develop a list? Of course, that's more work, that has members of the public be on a group email that not everybody gets listed in, that's blind CC'd. That those kind of things could be released, right? So if there's any of our public notices that we put on Facebook or on our webpage could just automatically go out to this list of people who voluntarily and requested that they get that information in their inboxes. So that helps for the digital. Because even if you have a computer, you might not have a Facebook account. But I don't know whether it could get excessive if we're trying to, it depends how long the document is, whether it goes in the Valley Voice, but not everybody does that. And in mailboxes, it's, then that's quite a bit of added cost in everybody's mailbox. It's really good.
It's not actually that expensive because we just did a mail out for the hospital auxiliary. So to send to the 400 and something mailboxes in Kaslo, it was about $80.
Oh.
So it goes by weight. So it's not as expensive as we think. I think we just have to determine if we went that route. Like, are we sending it only to the taxpayers of Kaslo, or like there's rural routes and stuff like that. So I think we just have to figure out who it would go to if we did a mail out. But they're not as expensive as you think.
Well, it would go to residents of Kaslo, I think. Because to try and creep into Area D territory is not a good idea, because that's, even though we're their business center, in most cases, that's an Area D thing. Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, perhaps if we were to identify certain areas where a majority of the misinformation is happening, that might be the fruitful area to direct our communication to. For example, Facebook seems to be an area where we often see misinformation and correct information mixing together. So it could be really difficult to be able to piece through what that is. So that would certainly be a fruitful area to be able to advertise or publish that. Valley Voice is another area where we get information that is conflicting often. It also is a print medium, so it does provide people who traditionally get their news that way an opportunity to be able to have access to it. I think the power in this, the danger of putting it up on that board, is that it doesn't actually end up correcting the information and getting to the people who have that misinformation. So I think it's really important that we target and we broadcast this to the channels where it's most likely to actually be fruitful, especially recognizing how valuable staff time is right now. If we are going to put time into this, then I think it's really important that it actually does have an impact, and it won't have an impact if it's not read or accessed by people in a way that doesn't require them to come down and walk here, through the building kind of thing. So I think those two venues would probably be the best way to get to the public.
Councillor Bird?
Through the chair, by bulletin board, I wasn't suggesting not do other things, but the bulletin board is certainly like ground level, accessible to all except for the blind. Facebook, you can't attach a document in a Facebook post, can you?
A link.
You can put a link to something on the website.
Yeah.
So the document on the website, I don't know how much room there is bandwidth on that website anymore, but there's that. And but actually a letter in the mail, that's kind of, I think I like a Valley Voice full page is, it's starting to get pretty pricey.
Yeah, it's probably 2 or 3 times
Mhm.
what the mail out would be.
Yeah. And I think, I used to like getting those mail outs from the village. Something personal about it, you know?
Not everyone shares that sentiment.
Oh. I-
Um,
Yeah, I just feel like a full page ad in Valley Voice is just sort of, I don't want to turn the Valley, I don't want to, the Valley Voice is already, sort of airing things that are,
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the forum. Like, I think we have more control of it through our website, through our own Facebook posts, through our own bulletin board, rather than, having this, it just reminds me of Donald Trump putting a full page ad in the New York Times saying these boys are guilty, you know, like, it bothers, I don't want to see that. So, yeah, that's my feeling is best get a mail out. That is the most democratic thing. Residents of Kaslo, it'll get shared to those people that are not residents of Kaslo, for sure. And, yeah, and I've noticed on Facebook that there's a document on the website.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I kind of like the mail out idea unless it's like ridiculously expensive. I don't like the full page ad in Valley Voice thing. Not that I don't support paper
Yeah.
hugely, I do.
Yeah.
Not with this.
And a comment about the sharing of the document on Facebook, you can just convert it to a photo and a JPEG and easily share it. You get around it by turning it into a photo. That's what I've discovered.
Imagining it would be too long for,
Multiple pages. We as the staff has the technology to do that stuff.
multiple.
I know, it's, yeah, multi-pages, so yeah. Well, and I've done it myself. It's, yeah. We've got talented staff. Did you have a further comment, Councillor Luther?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, so we do have a motion that we were discussing, correct? Can we read that back so we know what we're voting on?
That the village issue a public facing document to correct some of the misinformation regarding the RV park proposal.
All right. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Right. Yep, go ahead.
Second question that staff have for council is whether it would like an open house for the RV park proposal, perhaps in which staff provide a high level overview of the RV park proposal and the process to date. And then the public be given an opportunity to discuss issues with council. Maybe one counselor per table, they can sit down and talk to that counselor. So the question is council interested in having an open house for the RV park proposal?
Councillor Brown?
Through the chair, probably pretty predictable. I am interested in it. I think having an opportunity for our residents to be able to speak with us that isn't presented by the developer, which to this point, that's the opportunity that they've had, would only be fruitful. I think that having public engagement around this is incredibly important. And I think this is a forum that we have not offered yet. And so I would be in favor of this.
Councillor Lang?
Not surprisingly, I'm dead set against it. Unfortunately, what I've been reading in the Valley Voice the last couple of issues has completely turned me off to the idea of further public engagement. I think there's a process for what we're doing, and I think we need to follow the process and not keep moving the goalposts and expanding on how this is supposed to work. So I've read the letters, I've talked to different people about their thoughts, some for, some against. I've got all the information I need. And for that reason, I would not support a public, an open house.
Councillor Leithwood?
To the chair. I in agreement with Councillor Lang. I think that, you know, the public input has been valuable. They've raised really good concerns and points, but they have raised a lot. And it has, as I said, it has been going on for 20 months. We did have a committee of the whole, which was basically an open house because the public was invited to come as delegations and ask questions. So I believe we've already had a lot of public engagement, and there's no new information to present. If there was new information, then I would definitely be supportive of an open house, but there's not. It's the same information we've been giving out for months. So I think our next step should be the committee of the whole for the purchase and sale agreement.
Councillor Bird?
I'm in favor of an open house. I take the point where the only open house that has been arranged so far has been an exposition from the developer, and I don't see it necessarily as an open house so that we get the same old information. I also think it's a chance to do some dialogue, and honestly, that's so what dialogue means is you're listening, they're asking, you ask them questions in return, like that's not happening. So I kind of like the idea that Robert CAO Baker, where counselors are there and are able to engage in dialogue, and I think that is shouldn't be too hard. Like it shouldn't be too much of a burden. And yeah, I'm in favor of it, and I'll make a motion that we find a time to have an open house where it's council, it's residents, and there's an opportunity for dialogue.
I would second that.
Discussion? Or any further discussion? And I guess I have a question that the goal of this, other than that we would each, you know, if it was like that each council member perhaps is at a table. There's what, you know, I think the most valuable piece would be CAO Baker's opening, right? Because otherwise it will be discussing what the opinions of people are, not necessarily what we can do and cannot do, because there's been a lot of strain, because I think people have tended to forget that the bulk of that land is private land, and there are things that he could do irregardless if we sell him the land that is municipally owned. So it is private land, and we have lost sight of that. It is not a park, as has been, you know, that is a desire, but nobody can compel the owner to sell the land or give it away and say it's going to be a park and with continuous public access. I think that the facts need to be laid on the table, and perhaps that could be part of, well, that would be part of the correcting misinformation. But I guess what would be the end result other than getting a large group of people in a room with council to give us the same, potentially the same information that we've been receiving as been stated for the past 20 months. And will it be facilitated, or because I know that at the one that the developer put on, which it was his development and he was introducing that, so he needed to be there because we didn't know the information ourselves at that point. Should it be facilitated? Will they be unhappy if there's not a general Q&A? Because that was a sticking point from that meeting, was people didn't want to sit individually and just chat with people. They wanted, I want to air my opinions and my questions in front of the entire group, not just I'm going to talk to Councillor Brown, then I'm going to go talk to Councillor Bird and ask the same question. Because if you do a speed dating thing, you know, how much time are you going to have? So we really want to give some thought to, if we're going to proceed, what the format will be, so that it's valuable for the public and it's valuable for council. And it could go down a road that it might not get what we want and what we think we need out of this. Those are my thoughts on that. It's just, we've got to be careful what we're proposing. And, there's obviously going to be costs involved. Do we have, if we determine that we should have somebody facilitating, so that it doesn't get out of hand, because we're, hopefully everyone would be respectful on both sides. Because we have a policy as council, how we're to conduct ourselves, but that does not necessarily apply to members of the public. And so I saw Councillor Leithwood.
To the chair. If we do decide to do that, I would really want to make sure that there are parameters around, as you say, how it's going to unfold. We've already been accused of several things that I find quite disturbing from members of the public, and I'm not going to entertain that. I mean, if that's what it's going to be like, that we're accused of taking bribes and all of those things, then I don't think it's fair to put council in that position. So I would just want to make sure that however it unfolds, that we have strict parameters around, behavior and the kind of questions. And we've put out all that information. We don't want to have to reiterate it all over again. So.
Did you have another question? Go ahead, Councillor Graham.
Through the chair. In reference to that, I think that, like you said, we do have a code of conduct that doesn't necessarily go to the public. I also think that we are leaders in our community and that we can model civil discourse that we desire from the public, and that this gives us an opportunity to be able to actually do that. Can we guarantee it will come back to us? No, but you never can in life. You do your best to try to model what it is and then hope that people will follow. To your comment that this is a private land and that they can do whatever they want, regardless of what if they were to just be on their part of their land. I suppose I would provide the reminder that this would not be a conversation where they'd not to be trying to buy public land. And because they're trying to buy public land, they would not be able to do the plan they're doing with their current land set the way it is. So, saying, well, this is private land and we're kind of getting, elevated about something that maybe is not in actuality. I think it's important to remember that the reason why we're around this table and why we're even having this conversation is because they are trying to buy the developer has proposed to buy land that is owned by our constituents and ourselves. And so were they to just be proposing something where they use the footprint of the land that they own, this would be a very different conversation. And I don't think an open house would be necessary. But as there is a public aspect to this, there's money changing hands, there's land changing hands. I think that's important to keep at the forefront. I also think the difference between what the developer provided in November 2023 and what this would be is that the intention of that was to provide the community information that they didn't have about this plan. It wasn't for the community to then provide information back. And if it was, I would suggest that it wasn't heard or actioned, and that the intention of this would be truly two-way, where we provide information as to what we understand and where our position is, and that then the public has an opportunity to provide information back to us. I agree, rehashing information that we've got in emails or that we're already aware of wouldn't be the most fruitful use of our time. But were there to be conversations, I personally welcome conversations from people on the opposite view of mine, so that I can more fully understand constituents who feel differently than I do or have an opinion that I might not have. And it gives me an opportunity to be able to have a more wholesome understanding of both sides. Because as we've heard, we have certainly heard a lot from people who do not want to see it. And I see this as an opportunity for people who were perhaps in favor of this to come out and speak to us. And for, you know, the constituents who don't feel that their voice is heard, this could be an opportunity to allow them to have conversations that aren't across this table, that are one-to-one. I wouldn't want to put us in a position where we would be verbally abused or have to take anything like that. But honestly, that could happen out on the road when we're going grocery shopping. So I think leading and setting a space with intention of civil discourse where we can respectfully debate something is what we want to see in our community. So that's how I would choose to lead.
Councilor Bird?
For sure, with an introduction with staff about how the process goes. Yeah.
And I do just want to make a comment. Yes, the developer wouldn't be putting forth this proposal if there wasn't municipal land involved, but there are other options on his land. So it doesn't preclude him from doing anything just because if we don't sell him the land. And actually, I do want to correct you. Well, I won't correct you, but I will point out that our job, that if we have this open house, will not be to debate with the members of the public. I view it as listening to the public rather than, because we've obviously around this table have different opinions on the topic. And our job, it would be almost like a public hearing, that we're there to listen and take it in and not to say, oh, you're right, you're right, you're right. But because that's based on us as individuals, because we're not going to be there as a council with a unified voice. We're going to be 5 councillors engaging on a personal level. That's the way I see it. So we're not all going to be having the same discussions with all the members of the public. So, all right. Well, at least I don't see it going. The questions will be the same, but the exchanges will not be identical. Councilor Brown.
Through Chair, I think that offers us an opportunity. You're right, not to debate with people, but to provide our understanding and where we're coming from. Right. And so that's not necessarily debating back and forth with them as much as having transparency around our mindset and deliberations and thoughts around it.
All right. So did we have a motion that was proposed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Can we?
Councilor Bird, Councilor Brown seconded,
Okay.
and I think you have in green
Okay.
the words that Councilor Bird would like to have used.
Okay. Well, potentially that the village schedule an open house for the RV park proposal. Is that short and sweet?
Sure. Can be anything we need it to be with that broad.
That was from CAO Baker. He's giving me some cheat notes here.
Okay.
All right. So that was moved and seconded. Any further discussion before I call the question? Councillor Lee.
Chair, just a procedural question, I guess. So would we do this before we continue when we look at the purchase and sale agreement?
Through the chair to Councilor Leithwood, just to summarize, public facing document would be issued likely in July at some point, and an open house would potentially occur in August. And ideally, that would all occur before a committee of the whole happens, where council is finalizing the terms and conditions of the purchase and sale agreement. So you would have had an opportunity to receive impact or input from the public at the open house, and then perhaps at later in August, you would be looking at finalizing the conditions of a purchase and sale agreement, or perhaps a better way to put it is considering whether to finalize the purchase and sale agreement.
All right.
Call the
So,
question.
yeah, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? In favor. All right, so that motion passes. So now that brings us to the end of our business meeting. So council will now rise and report. And so we have so stemming from the dog control bylaw discussion, that was a motion to refer that to strategic planning, correct? So that will be reflected in there. And then procedures bylaw, did we make a motion on that? It was just more for information. And then so then we had the motion regarding the public document for correcting the misinformation. And then about the open house. Oh, purchase and sale agreement, did we need? Okay, so those items then will be reflected in the, okay, so, sorry, we go back into, we will now rise and report, so we'll reconvene the meeting at 8:38, and then we get to do that all over again. So if you could read the motion then, so we are reconvened in open. So just so we have the exact wording, because we'll have to do it all over again, because this is committee of the whole just recommends to council. So council now has to actually pass the motions, then make them official. That was just the committee of the whole part. So, so the first one.
Through the chair, what we can do is consider the three motions as one.
Right.
Unless council would like to vote again on each motion individually. So as a lump sum, the three motions that will be passed as one resolution would be that the dog control bylaw topic be referred to council's strategic priority planning session, followed by the village issue a public facing document to correct some of the misinformation regarding the RV park proposal. And the final, that the village host an open house, sorry, I'll let you read that one.
That the village schedule an open house for the RV park proposal.
So that would be
Okay.
one resolution.
All right. Would you like to move that? Councillor Brown and Councillor Bird. Any discussion, dare I ask? But this is the meeting, so all right, so I will call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. So then the recommendation is that in accordance with section 91A, part of a council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and that persons other than council members and municipal officers be excluded from the meeting. By Councillor Brown. Second by Councillor Leafwood. All those in favor? Is carried. So,